Welcome
Welcome
back,
back,
everybody.
everybody.
Um, so
So,
so good to have Brian here. Um, I have to say, as many of you know, that I hold ordination status in two different denominations, um, and I've had district supervisors and bishops and people that I'm accountable to since it's been my whole adult life. But I kind of I kind of claim Brian as my bishop. uh, I read, I don't know which one because I've read several since, but I read one of his books about 20 years ago when I was really starting to feel kind of, I guess the best word I can think of is lonely, as I began to question even more things that were always questions for me when it came to structural Christianity in various kinds of colonized forms. And when you ask questions and people around you may not be asking them so intensely or seriously. In fact, I remember sitting in a meeting with a group of evangelical pastors here in Santa Barbara, and they brought up the name of this controversial emerging church person, Brian McLaren, and I'd never heard of him. And I just, and then and there, he came up in another conversation, and it was always like this controversial figure. So one day, this is about 20 years ago, I picked up one of his books and I read it, and I thought, I don't read, I didn't read anything in here that was controversial, and not a single thing. It was refreshing, um, and I guess it just depends on what questions you're asking or not asking. But I love Brian McLaren, and some of you know that he did write the foreword to my book a few years ago, 2017. Um, and this is a different kind of intro. I'm not going to talk about where Brian went to school and all of those kind of things. I'm just going to stop here and just let
Mhm.
Brian take it away. All right.
Well, thank you so much, David. Can you all hear me okay? Thumbs up. Great. David, the feeling is mutual. I'm sure happy to be with you and happy to be with this beautiful community. I was telling the little breakout group, I live in Southwest Florida, where every day from about June until middle of October, it's 91 to 94 degrees with about equal humidity. And so our what do they call it? Heat index has been between 107 and 117 a lot in the last several weeks. And so hearing you all talk about the incredible heat there, I just feel like misery loves company. So and when we think about climate change, this is not encouraging, but scientists tell us we should assume that every year will be the coolest year of the rest of our lives. So we've got a lot to get through together. Um, I uh, I was very touched by that first song, and I just feel I can't really start my talk without interacting with the sincerity I felt from the singer and all the people in the video with this prayer, God, don't give up on me yet. Um, and I, I'm going to be very transparent and just talk about the things that stirs up in me. Um, I grew up in a setting where that would be the kind of prayer I would be praying constantly, because I had this idea that God was perfect and I was imperfect, and that God had an irresistible desire to destroy and torture anything that was imperfect. It was the view of God that many of us have been given. And so there was a famous early American preacher, in some ways the father of hellfire and damnation, preaching and he preached a sermon called "Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God," and he described uh, you as a human being as a spider dangling on a web, and this spider is so abhorrent to God, and God just wants to throw it in the fire, and this feeling that we have to plead with God not to throw us away, you know. And I didn't feel that in the song, but I think that's a theology that's behind that creates a lot of the psychological distress. I also think that I felt in singing that song, we're not only singing it to God, we're singing it to each other because we have this fear that other people are a little bit like that. I think we especially feel it in kind of cancel culture, where if you say the wrong thing or do the wrong thing, that you'll be, you know, everyone will pile on you and nobody can defend you because you'll be universally shamed and rejected. And so I feel there's almost in that song not only a prayer to God, but a prayer to each other. Don't give up on me yet, you know. Um, and uh, and it also makes me think why maybe there is a prayer to ourselves too, because I think there's a part of ourselves that are ready to give up on ourselves sometimes. And I felt that in that second song that you know, I don't know the details of that song and maybe I didn't understand it fully, but I think there are quite a few songs out there pleading with people not to commit suicide, not to give up on themselves. And so this idea, don't give up on me yet, that's sort of resonating with me. And I think what I'd like to do in the moments that we have together is I'd like to invite you to a kind of spiritual thought experiment or heart experiment. And instead of thinking about God as the one who's most likely to give up on us, I'd like to propose that we think for a minute of God as the love that is least likely to give up on us. And in fact, would never, ever, ever give up on us. You might remember in the Hebrew scriptures, I believe it's in Isaiah, uh, you know, the prophets, in many ways, they feel the agony of the people and the agony of history and the agony of being human. And they try to intersect with the Spirit of God and come up with something to say. And in one place, Isaiah said, speaking as if Isaiah were God, you know, sort of playing God to us in the best sense of the word. He says, can a mother forget the child that nurses at her breast? And can she forget to show compassion on the child born of her womb? Then he says, though a mother's love may fail, I will not forget you, for I have engraved you in the palms of my hands. And of course, that phrase, palms, my hands, I think has a particular connection to us who are Christians and think of the story of Jesus and the crucifixion and the nail scarred hands. This sense that that God's love, and one of the things I love about this passage is it's one of the passages that images God as a mother. And it's hard to think of any other passage that is more poignant in imaging God than can a mother forget the child who's nursing at her breast? Can she forget to show and the image of the breast and the womb? It's like this deep physical connection. And any of you who are mothers understand it better than the rest of us. But because all of us had mothers, we certainly get it in some way too. What if we were to understand God not as the first one to reject and condemn us, but the very, very last, the one who actually could not reject us without rejecting God's own heart, God's own self, because God actually truly loves all of creation. Uh, I don't know where I came across this, but some years ago I came across a definition of God as the love through which we encounter everyone and everything. In other words, if we were to think of a love that loves everything, every blade of grass, every individual leaf on every tree, every little sardine swimming in a school of a million sardines in the ocean, every molecule, every asteroid in the asteroid belt. Think of the expanse of galaxies, a love that is there. There is no omnipresence of that love without love being there. It's this universal love that touches everything. And what if that is the place we started with God instead of starting with the idea that we're on really thin ice and one more mistake and God could give up on us and say, had your chance, buddy. That's it. We start with God who loves us and everything. We don't start with us. We start with a God who loves everything. And because we're part of everything, we qualify as being loved. We start with a God who loves because that's what God is. In fact, if we start there, however we imagine the Big Bang and when everything begins, that Big Bang is an expression, it's a blooming, an explosion of love saying, I'm real. I want to let other things be real. I'm generous. In my generosity, I want to share the chance to be conscious and alive and aware. I want to share it with everything. And you might say, well, hold it. It's just maybe human beings and some number of advanced evolutionary biology here on this planet that's conscious. Well, first of all, we don't know that that's the case. But second of all, there is a certain sense that we're just one part of this earth. You could see us as one part of the living earth. And I don't think that my fingernail is necessarily conscious, but it's part of me who is a conscious being. And so if we were to consider ourselves part of a living earth, then suddenly everything shares in the aliveness here. And who knows what happens in other faraway galaxies, right? And of course, we don't know where this whole thing leads in a million or a billion or 10 billion years. Lots of theories, but our understanding is constantly being modified. If we start with God as this overflowing fountain of love that gives it, that everything that exists is an expression of that love. I wonder what we would sing. I wonder what we would sing. And I wonder what we would see. And I wonder what we would feel. I think so many of us have been shaped by this God whose sort of real nature is wrath and manages to stir up enough love to keep from destroying us and maybe save a few people and damn everybody else. But I just think that's part of what Jesus is trying to lift us beyond. Jesus frequently told another version of Isaiah's metaphor. He would say, look, all of you who are fathers, and you had a child who fell in a well, would you leave, or you had an ox who fell in a pit, even if it was your animal, or if you had a child who came and asked you for a loaf of bread, would you give that child a piece of granite instead? No, he appeals to basic human compassion as if to say, look, God's got to be at least as nice as us. And dare we imagine a God with that kind of love? You see it in the prodigal son story where the wasteful, trouble, seeking son is loved, and the judgmental, frightened, small-hearted son is loved. And they're both loved because that's how the Father is. That's how God is. That's how the mother is who nurses the whole universe at God's breast, so to speak, from whom the whole universe is, in a sense, born. And if we start at that place, I think we will go in many, many exciting new places. Um, I and as many of you know, This year, I had a book come out called I should put it right side up, called Life After Doom, and and in this book, I'm trying to deal with what I call our current situation. Different experts in the world are calling it the multi-crisis or the poly-crisis. And of course, we know that global warming is one part of that, but it's really just maybe one of the visible tips of a fast melting iceberg. And we have mentioned many of the other dimensions of it when we talked about the horrible things going on in Gaza, human violence, uh, and human violence that's often based on race and religion and nationality and language and culture and wealth and power. Um, and and so this whole package of what it is about us that in that powerful Cole Arthur Riley reading, um, where we actually think the world needs to be saved from us, and one of the ways that the world can be saved by us is us being saved from the destructive tendencies that we can develop. I was so interested that Cole Arthur Riley even used the word civilization to say, under the name civilization, we've done many of our greatest horrors. And what if a little gathering like this on a Sunday morning, what if we are people who are trying to realign and reconnect our hearts with that primal, ultimate reality of love that was there before the universe began and will be there all the way through, and that will never give up, not only give up on us, but will never give up on the whole creation? What if our only danger is not God giving up on us, but us not allowing ourselves to be brought back into harmony with God's love, and which means love and harmony with all of creation? Um, I wanted to read for you a statement by a 20th century theologian who actually didn't like being called a theologian. I'll tell you what he liked being called in a minute. He's somebody that too few people have heard of. He was a Catholic priest, spent many years in a monastery, and and he as through his research and reading, he became interested as a Catholic. He was of the age that he came of age as Vatican II was happening, and Vatican II represented an opening up. Maybe some of us would say temporary because the structures closed back down again largely, but an opening up of Catholicism to science and to philosophy and to other religions and to issues of social justice. And first became intrigued by learning how his own faith helped him understand and appreciate other faiths, and even how the understanding of other faiths helped him appreciate his own faith. And then that led to him thinking about all of human beings as a whole, not just Catholics, but all human beings as a whole. And then that led him to think of the earth as a whole. And his name was Thomas Berry. If you've never heard of him, he's one of those heroes that I got to get to introduce you to today, because I think hundreds of years from now, many of the names who've been very famous to us will have been forgotten. But my guess is Thomas Berry will be one of those names that really stands out. Um, and I want to read you a statement. Thomas Berry would frequently say this back in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. He would say, I can summarize our human situation in 3 sentences. And here they are. First sentence. And I'll read them a couple times because you can tell he crafted these quite carefully. First sentence. The glory of the human has become the desolation of the earth. The glory of the human has become the desolation of the earth. I think you feel it. We imagine all of our great technological advancements, but then we realize we're purchasing these technological advancements through the desolation of the earth. the things that we feel so proud of. I mean, I think of the air traffic control system. What an incredible invention. I think of, a shopping mall where you can get anything, like this. Uh, I mean, now you think of artificial intelligence, these incredible inventions. The glory of the human has become the desolation of the earth. Second statement, the desolation of the earth is becoming the destiny of the human. The desolation of the earth is becoming the destiny of the human. Obviously, if we bring down the earth, if we knock the earth out of its life sustaining zone, then, our future is not bright. Stunningly, the world's richest person a few weeks ago met with a certain presidential candidate of the richest and most powerful country in the world. Um, and they both discounted, they showed such stunning ignorance of the ecological crisis. Uh, I think 80% of fourth graders in the world understand our current situation better than these two very powerful white men understand it. They don't understand either of these first two statements. And then the third statement, I'm going to shorten a bit, but Thomas Berry said, all human activities must now be judged by the extent to which they foster a mutually enhancing human earth relationship. In other words, the only question that's worth asking right now about human activity is, are we moving toward a mutually enhancing human earth relationship? And that involves a change of heart. And it may be that we won't get to that change of heart until we get to a change in our understanding of God. If we understand God to be essentially love, then God is essentially relational. And the kind of relationship in God is a relationship of giving and receiving, self giving and self receiving, pouring out love and fully receiving love, absolute generosity and absolute receptivity in this beautiful eternal dance and relationship. And if that's how we understand God, and we see it then reflected in all of the beautiful cycles of life in this web of life, then if we were to believe that's the ultimate and that's the God that we love, then I think something deep would change in us. And it would change the way we relate to each other and the way we relate to this earth. And we would feel the fidelity of God to us, even in the mess we're in. And that's why I think, in a certain way, I resonate with "Don't give up on me yet." And I want to say it for our whole species: God, don't give up on us yet. We've taken things to the brink, but we need your help now more than ever. And we trust in that faithfulness of God to help us grapple with this reality. Um, some years ago, I'd been a preacher for many years, and I felt that the way I had been taught to read the Bible was almost like a lawyer treats an annotated code. Every sentence is about equal in importance to every other sentence. And so we would quote different verses and create little fabrics of, we called them systematic theologies. And I started to wonder if that was the best way to approach the Bible. And I thought, shouldn't Jesus' words be really, really important to us? If things are kind of building up toward Jesus, shouldn't Jesus' words really be considered at sort of a pinnacle? And then if I look at Paul and James and John, they're trying to explain and apply Jesus' words. Again, it's like you have one floodlight pointing from the past toward Jesus and one light pointing back toward Jesus. Shouldn't Jesus really be in the spotlight if we want to call ourselves Christians, center stage, really paying attention to him? And when I did that, I thought, well, I should focus on Jesus' most concentrated teaching. And it was the first time in my life I'd ever done this. I preached a sermon through a whole summer where we went through the Sermon on the Mount. And that the preaching of that set of sermons changed my life, because I saw that what Jesus was about was not what the Christian religion is about in many, many cases. And that the assumptions Jesus had about God and life seemed so different from our assumption. And things that seemed very unimportant previously suddenly seemed very important. And that brought me to a verse that I memorized because it was a song that we sang. Seek ye first the kingdom of God and God's righteousness, and all these things will be added to you. And it's in Matthew 6:33, if you want to look it up. And I went back and savored that verse in its context. And it begins by Jesus saying, look, don't worry about all the things other people are worried about. And he refers to them as the Gentiles. The Gentiles are always worried about what they eat, what they drink, what they wear. Well, when Jesus says Gentiles, he's talking about the Romans. And the Romans are that occupying oppressive force that is oppressing his people. I mean, really, it sounds ironic, but in many ways, you look at the people, how the people in Gaza must feel with the Israeli government and then the American government supporting the Israeli government and many other governments. And they just feel the whole world's against us. We're on the bottom. Nobody cares about us. And that's very much how Jesus and his countrymen felt. We're kind of at the bottom of the pyramid. And so what Jesus does is he says, but look at these Gentiles. It's not that they're such evil people. It's that they're such worried people. They're always worried about what are we going to eat? What are we going to drink? What are we going to wear? Of course they act like this when they live with such insecurity. And then he says, instead, don't look at the Romans for advice on how to live. If he were here today, I think he'd say, don't look at billionaires for advice on how to live. They're the most confused of everybody. He says, look at the birds of the air and the flowers of the field. They're part of this natural world. You want to figure out how to live? Look at things that are living in harmony the way they should. Things with beauty, things with sustainability. You know, the flowers rise up and die every year, but their kind comes back next year. They're okay. And so Jesus is saying, stop modeling yourself on human empires and human civilizations. Start modeling yourself on the natural ecosystem of God, the natural world that God created. Get back in harmony with the kind of harmony that you see and you feel there. And one of the things he says is, you look at those birds. They don't need warehouses. They don't need distribution centers. They don't, they don't need all of those things that our civilization needs. And yet God makes sure that they're fed. So he says, there is a way to re-enter a harmony with this world that would reduce our anxiety and would let us know that we belong in this beautiful web of life, that we have a place here, and we could live with joy instead of with all of this anxiety and the violence and oppression and injustice that it leads to. And it's such a fascinating promise. Seek first this larger realm of God. Seek first this original harmony and balance and relationship. And when you seek that first and enter into that big picture, things will fall in place. You'll have what you need. And brothers and sisters and friends, I just think that this is our situation today. We all know that between now and November 5th, there's going to be a lot of talk, and there's going to be a lot of anxiety and a lot of anger and a lot of lying and a lot of hope and a lot of important conversations. And then who knows what will happen between November 5th and January 20th. But we know that there will be reasons to be anxious going forward. And if our lives only depended on our place in a political party or a political system or a nation or an economy, If that was the ultimate reality, I suppose we'd have reasons to be anxious. But if we are able to zoom back in this little thought or heart experiment and understand that actually the ultimate reality is divine love, and that if we can trust ourselves to that divine love, then there will be enough. We'll have what we need, and we'll make it through. And when our time comes to finish our lives on this earth, we don't have to know in detail what comes after. We just know that as we've been able to trust ourselves to this beautiful love in which we live and move and have our being in life, we'll be able to entrust ourselves to that love in death. And so that's what I wanted to share with you today. And it's a thought experiment that, even if you decide you don't like it, just engaging in that experiment probably helps you imagine things and see things that you never saw before. And so let me stop there. And David, I'll turn it back to you. And if we want to have some discussion.
Hey Brian, this is Matt here. I'm going to continue the conversation.
Hi, Matt.
Hey, yeah, great to see you again. I'm just going to say a few things, and you can kind of pick the angle in which you want to go through them, because there's questions I can ask a few different ways here. But first off, I love the contrast in what you're kind of framing for us, of like this kind of controlling God, this God that they call the vending machine God, and kind of the fall idea of Adam and Eve, and the controlling of knowledge, and all those different types of things, and how that has been embedded in our domination Christianity forms, and how it's been just kind of been distributed upon us, and what the other one looks like. Really frame that contrast for us well, and what that freedom looks like. And I'm always looking to see how that gets brought into our culture and into our communities. So I guess you can maybe go down that angle. I also want to kind of tap in on the Thomas Berry. I was really excited to see you bring in. I just saw the streams of Saint Francis in Thomas Berry, and we have some Catholics in the group here, or previous Catholics, or I'm not sure how they want to identify, but so just kind of a nod to that history, that generation that was really being transformed by our ecological devastation that was taking place. In the first two quotes by Barry, I was just thinking like, oh, that is the foundation of colonization. That is just colonial bodies doing colonial things, or colonized bodies doing colonial things. And I just the last line of Barry's, I just thought of like, oh, that is just applied Franciscan theology. And I know he didn't like theology, but it's just applied Franciscan, like in practice. It's not it's on the ground, and I really appreciate that. And it made me think of another mid-century person that didn't like to be called a theologian, but was a theologian in practice, Paulo Freire. And we can take the conversation this way too, because I think it kind of gives a little bit connection to your earlier point of Paulo says that we can leave one fundamentalism and go to another fundamentalism, and it ends up in the same fatalistic outcome. Yes. And I see that in a lot of us that have left this fundamentalist, this traditional Christianity, this harmful way of thinking. And how do we come to that place where we don't end up in the same fatalistic outcomes? So there's a few different strands there. Pull what you want, and then we'll call on some other people with some questions.
Oh my goodness, Matt, that's fantastic. Well, first of all, I should say your comments reminded me that I didn't tell folks what Thomas Berry liked to be referred to as opposed to a theologian. I think later in his life, he felt that word theologian became about people who argue about things that were really a distraction from our real situation. So he liked to be called a geologian. and what he meant by that is, I believe we encounter God in the earth, in our lived experience as creatures on this planet. And so I don't want to talk about God separate from the earth. So he just flipped it, and that was his term for that. Yes, and you mentioned Paulo Freire and the sort of larger movement that Freire was somewhat connected to that we call liberation theology had something similar emerging where people said this theology of a God who's, well, my friend Diana Butler Bass calls it the elevator God, who always wants to take us up to the top floor and get us away from the basement, and things on this earth. They said, look, that view of God has allowed millions, and we would say billions of people to be oppressed and excluded and exploited. And so they're looking at negative impacts of those understandings of God, ways they've been abused and led to systems that are very hard for us to get rid of. And so, and this is to me, you could almost think of it like all of these writers and thinkers, it's like the 20th century's labor pains, and they're trying to give birth to something. And I think we are in the situation of being midwives to what needs to be given birth to. And this is one of the great challenges for Christian communities in these years, to accept that and, in a certain sense, relax and trust. What could it be that the Spirit of God is trying to give birth to through us? So much more we could say about that, Matt, but I hope that's a good start. And I see we have some other questions lined up.
Yeah. We have a couple of hands raised, and let me just before we go to them say that I really felt you came with a mission to remind us of our connection to creation, to the ground on which we stand, and the trees that surround us, and the waters, to remind us that we're a part of this. We know this, but I feel like you made it a mission today. It's where you are. And so, in alignment, when we started today, Ana Rosa led us in a moment of silence for the 26-year-old American Turkish woman who was shot by the IDF. I feel like if everybody's okay with it, we could have a moment of silence now for the earth. Well, let's hear from Lisa.
Good morning, Brian. Thank you for
Hi,
being
Lisa.
here. Hi. You brought out, I have two different threads that I want to dive into, so I don't think we have enough time to do everything I want. But you make me think of a book that I've been trying, a favorite children's book, and it's called Horton Hears a Who. And I think everybody might be familiar with that, but that always makes me think of what we all do with this. When you were talking about that view of God, I'm like, oh, that view of God is one of those broken systems you mentioned sometimes. And so I just wanted to, all the things are tying in. I always say this, and it's something I think I heard from Leo Buscaglia years ago. It's like, you're required to be perfect the day I am perfect. So you're all safe. And so I love that. So I often quote that. And I feel like God is looking forward to you when you're waking up, like that favorite dog who's just waiting for you to get up so you can go play and do things. And so I thought that is kind of maybe that change of a view of God could be more like that dog who's like waiting at the door for you. What are we going to do next? So I love that idea. Gosh, you mentioned so many wonderful things, and I'm always trying. I was speaking to my one of my roommates, and she was, I always talk her out of spraying things outside, and so I was talking, even. And I got down to like, all those microbes, all those microorganisms, we need those. And she started saying how there's so many billions of those around. And she's like, she got almost angry. And I'm always trying to say, do what you want, but think about this. And she got angry and she's like, look, I just brushed away 300 million of those things. And what? And I'm like, and I'm thinking, okay, people that are attached to those systems, it's like, they're angry when you're not. And I've tried this with a lot of family members that I've encountered, where I'm not giving them political position, but I ask them questions about theirs, and they get angry about that I ask questions. And so I just maybe want to have you speak a little more into that whole, when you are helping when you're talking to somebody and you want to help them disassociate from the broken system that they're personally taking on as part of their personality.
Yes.
The way I try to do it is I just try to be who I am.
Yeah.
But sometimes that doesn't even seem to work. So I just wanted your thoughts on that.
Oh, Lisa, well, thanks for that. And I think all of us can identify. So Lisa, this is going to sound super unhelpful, but maybe it actually could be helpful. Here it is. I don't think anything will work. Meaning, I don't think there's a fast route from here to where we need to be that doesn't involve a lot of frustration and a lot of conflict and a lot of misunderstanding. And that's because in a certain sense, you know how animals defend their territory, right? We have this very nasty hornet around here. It's called a red hornet. And they have those sort of paper nests, and they like to put them like right under the eave of a roof. And the thing with red hornets is you can't make eye contact with them because they actually see eye contact as aggression. And so if you see one of their nests and you just manage to not look at it, you're a lot safer than if you look at it, right? And I've had enough encounters with them to tell you it's not pleasant. But all they're doing is trying to protect their territory. And they're really trying to protect their little eggs and larvae in that nest. And when I see it as mamas trying to protect their babies, I understand why one of them sees me and comes and stings me right on the nose, right? Because they just want to make sure I stay away from their babies. Well, human beings become defensive, not only of their physical territory, but of their conceptual territory. And if they have a set of ideas that they like, and that set of ideas becomes almost like part of their zone of safety. And if you disturb it or disrupt it, usually this creates some tension. And so I don't think there is a way that works to avoid that. There's going to be contests and conflict. I think the chance that each of us has to figure out how we want to navigate that. And I think some of us maybe veer in the direction of, we don't care how angry it makes people. We're going to tell them what we want to tell them. And others, I was like, I don't ever want to disturb anybody. Right. And so I'll never speak up. Somewhere in between there, there's a zone where each of us is going to find our way of functioning. And yeah, that's probably all I should say about that. I wish I had a better answer, but
No, actually, it reminds me, it's like I'm just planting seeds. And
yes,
like, I'll plant the seed. I may not see it water or sprout or grow, but if somebody else goes on and sees the seed and maybe pours some water on it or gives it some dirt or something, then, it's like that whole idea of teachers say things 3 times so you start
Yeah.
to hear it.
Yeah.
And I just figure that makes sense. That's helpful, actually, because it's like,
Yeah.
if we all take up space, if we all make sure that our voice is heard, because
Yeah.
all of your voices are important, then maybe I won't be the one that gets through to them, but maybe 3 people down, oh, now it sinks in. And that's perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Let's hear what Robina has to offer.
Hi, Robina.
Hi. So thank you so very much. I first heard you when I first joined this community the year of COVID. And I still remember it was about the Beatitudes, and I loved your quote, which I looked up. You said something like, the poor are the manure in which we grow our money. If you were referring to, of course, all the people that we consider kind of evil today. So I want to begin with acknowledging that I recognize, as a person of God in Christ, you have probably touched more lives than you know of, and that you do bring encouragement to many, many people. Now, when you start with such glowing remarks, this is going to go somewhere else a little bit. And so I want to say that I was encouraged, but I was also discouraged. I was comfortable with what you had to say, but I'm also really uncomfortable. And let me go to something really specific, which helps you and probably others understand what I am talking about. So I'll go, I think I really appreciate Matt's opening questions. And then I also like what Lisa had to say, and I'm coming from somewhere in between. You quoted Thomas Berry, who I don't know. I don't hold many theologians in high respect. That's me personally, because I struggle with theology.
Yes.
I consider myself to be a person of faith, which means my theology, if it can be described that way, changes over time. But without taking too much more time, you had 3 quotes from Thomas Berry, who talked about the human. And that gives me pause. That's a flag for me. Because the only time we include all humans is when we're talking about gloom. Don't talk about all humans when we're talking about all the things that we boast about. And we is a very specific we. And so for me, I sit here being really uncomfortable, asking, what more can you give me that includes me as well? That gives me a way to think about the Word of God that comes not from this very limited perspective. And so without saying much more, that's kind of what I'd like you to be able to grapple with. And why is it when we talk, and I'll end with, yes, I was very encouraged, because you brought it all back to recentering and aligning with a God that's a God of the entire earth. I loved it that you went back to the verse in Matthew which said, seek the kingdom of God. So let me stop
Yes.
here.
Good. Well, Robina, stay unmuted for just a second. I I'm not 100% sure I understand where the problem came, but let me try and tell me if this is it. When I quoted uh, Thomas Berry, he makes this statement: "The glory of the human has become the desolation of the earth." And if I understand you right, when he says that, and when I quote him saying that, it feels like, hold it, you're taking all humanity and putting them in the same basket as kind of troublemakers in the world. Is that where the
Yes.
glitch comes?
So
Good.
if your whole intention is to talk about the what was it, life after doom?
Yes.
How did we get to that doom? And why is all humanity now responsible
Yes.
for it? Now,
Got it.
probably your
Got it.
answer is because we all love God, we want to believe in the love of God. Yes, so we're all going to fix it.
Yes.
But it escapes talking about something really important.
And that is?
That is, how did we get here? How
Got
did
it.
we
Got it.
come
Got
to
it.
a
Got it.
place?
Yes. So let me just say thank you so much for bringing that up. And that's exactly why conversation is such a good thing after somebody gives a monologue, right? So yeah, let's take that statement from Thomas Berry. I don't think he was trying to say every good thing humans have ever done leads to the desolation of the earth. I think there's a certain irony in this when he says the glory of the human. I think what he means is our modern technological, capitalistic, male dominated, militaristic civilization that many people consider the glory of humanity is actually creating serious problems for us. So, but that doesn't mean that the beautiful meal that someone just cooked for their family as an expression of their love for their family is meaningless and all the rest. So I think your statement points out that we can't take Thomas Berry as if he's making an absolute statement that there he's making a statement for effect, and we don't want to take it any farther than that. Um, I, One of the great problems that we face, and I think this was actually in the little reading from Cole Arthur Riley, one of the tragedies is that the powers that have created this civilization and profited by it have set things in motion in the earth so that the people who profited least and suffered most in the creation of the system will continue to profit least and suffer most, right? And so that's part of the whole mess that we're facing and needing to address. Let me respond to one other thing, Ravina, and then our time might be drawing to a close. I'm not sure, but um, I don't think we will all be involved in the healing process. Um, I think many people will oppose the healing process. Uh, and those of us who are involved in the healing process will have to do our best. And one of the toughest things we'll have to contend with is the opposition of people who don't want to be part of that. And yet this becomes part of our challenge because we can't see the people who oppose us as people we hate or want to destroy or want to just sweep away and forget about. We have to bring the very love that we're talking about to our struggle. And that's and any of us who feel called to be part of that struggle, I think that's good and holy work that we're part of. It's in Thomas Berry's words, it's a mutually enhancing human earth relationship. Humans benefiting each other, humans benefiting the earth benefiting humans, that kind of relationship. So I hope that's helpful, Rubina. But thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Your comment, I think, helps me realize that things that Thomas Berry may have been saying and that I was emphasizing there's a certain sense they're made for effect, and you don't want to be that. None of us want to be that, make those sort of blanket judgments. So thank you.
Yep. Brian, thank you so much for your time today. We are getting close to our end here. I'm going to transition to communion. I will just say, like, in addition to that, and I'll let you close with your final words as we go to communion, but just acknowledging that the doom complex was created by particular people, and the people that created the doom complex like to talk about doom and apocalypse as if it's not already happened to other people. And
Yes.
so I think, apocalypse has already happened to other people in this world. And so it's just newer to some other people in their perspective. So I heard that in your words today.
Yes.
And so if you want to take a few moments, 10 or 15 seconds to wrap up your words, and then we'll transition to communion.
Well, let me just say something about communion. For a lot of people, life is a war. And everything is about us defeating them. But here at communion, we make the audacious proposition that life is a family meal, and we're coming together to be reconnected and celebrate our connection with each other. Let our hostilities, our resentments go, and re-enter this beautiful connection. And in the eating of bread and wine, we're eating our fellow creatures have received sunlight and turned it into wheat. And our fellow creatures have received sunlight and turned it into grapes. And then our fellow humans have worked with those beautiful substances and rendered them into this food that we share. A beautiful reminder of our re-entry into this fabric of love and mutuality.
Brian, you referenced our opening song a couple of times. God, don't give up on me. I come across these songs in a number of ways. Sometimes people in this group send me songs, or even people who are not part of us, or sometimes they show up algorithmically or whatever. But I've had that song in my library for several months, and I went back and forth. Like, are people going to hear this? Am I going to be imposing this on people? Something that people have escaped from, a mentality that will it appear that I'm trying to take us back into that? But I also, like you, heard something else in that song, and I think it had to do with the apparent vulnerability and sincerity of the presenters of the song.
Yes.
And so I also heard, God, don't give up on me. I heard people don't give up on me.
Yes.
And I heard me don't give up, all of that in the song. And I was really hoping and thinking that, man, that's probably how we're going to take it.
Yes.
Anyway, thank you so much, Bishop Brian. We're going to go to communion, and Margie's going to lead us.
Thank you so much, Brian. There's so much. I wish we had more time to talk. I'm only on chapter 6 of your book, and it's wonderful. And I hope as a church group, maybe we can study it together. I really felt led this morning to reach out to our Native American brothers and sisters to get their perspective on communion, since I believe that their narrative, their story is that we as humans always have been one with our creation. And I found this in the Native American writing group of the Open Source Liturgy Project. And if just bear with me, it's just beautiful words. I just want to read them as everyone gathers their communion elements. Welcome, family. Welcome, relations. Welcome, all. The house of the Creator is our gathering place today. The feast has been prepared for us all. God who walked with our ancestors, who walks among us now, and who will walk with our children's children for generations to come, we give you thanks for your presence in the air that we breathe, in the sound of the rustling leaves, and in the waving grass. We give you thanks for your presence. And in the sound of children's laughter and in the songs of our elders, we give you thanks for your presence. They restate their mission. For our mission, let your spirit move us to honor and respect one another. From the least to the greatest, may we treat everyone we encounter with dignity and love. May we affirm the image of the Creator within each of us. And may we help restore the image of the Creator on earth. May our words, thoughts, and actions nourish and sustain your creation. And for the church, may she lead and dance with honor. Let all who follow her steps and rhythm know and feel righteousness and strength. And may her regalia exemplify purity and perfection. And for the world, may the nations of the earth gather to listen to the heartbeat of God. And may they sit in silence as the great peacemaker teaches and shows them how to walk upright. May the war clubs and instruments of destruction be transformed into life-giving means of grace. So as the grain was given by Creator God to all peoples of the world, Jesus Christ was also given to nourish and sustain. And as the fruit of the vine was given by Creator God to all peoples of the world, Jesus Christ was also given to bind us to God and one another. Spirit, help us now. Come and breathe into these gifts of bread and juice. As we receive these gifts into our bodies, may our breath become the sweet breath of Christ. So take now your symbol for the bread, the body of Christ given for you, and take from the cup which represents the love of Christ poured out for you. And they have a beautiful closing. I just wanted to share, we have taken Jesus into us, and now we go out into the different directions to be the hands and feet of Jesus. We go out to correct what we did wrong and what others did wrong, and to sometimes take the blame for another's mistakes, as Jesus did for us. We go out to stand up for the powerless, the voiceless, and those invisible. Gracious God, let your